"Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step off the plane," the man said, not quite meeting her eyes. Evelyn Brooks, seated quietly in 1A, glanced up, calm, composed, but already understanding what this was. She reached for her coat with deliberate grace, unaware that this quiet moment would shake an entire industry. Denver International Airport buzzed with the usual late morning rhythm, rolling luggage, coffee orders echoing from Gate 12, and the subtle hum of a terminal never quite asleep. Evelyn Brooks sat alone, her spine straight, posture poised, dressed in a soft cream linen suit and low-heeled tan loafers. Pearl earrings caught the overhead lights just right. She was a woman who moved through the world with deliberate elegance, a woman who had lived long enough to know that sometimes silence says more than a speech. A printed boarding pass rested in her left hand, and in her right, a leather tote with the initials EB pressed discreetly into the corner. At 73, Evelyn no longer rushed for anything, not boarding, not conversation, not explanations. She glanced at the nearby monitor. Flight 345 to Atlanta, first-class boarding in 10 minutes. Right on schedule. She was headed to see her grandson Isaac graduate top of his class in biomedical engineering at Emory. She hadn't missed a single milestone since he first took apart a toaster at age 6. First row in the auditorium, like always. The gate agent, a young woman in a navy blazer with an oversized airline pin, called for first class. Evelyn stood, calm and assured, and approached the counter. She handed over her boarding pass with a small, polite smile. The agent scanned it and returned it with a mechanical nod. Evelyn stepped through. No issue. No pause. That came later. Inside the cabin, Evelyn placed her coat in the overhead bin with the same care she used to install thermal insulation panels during her early days at Lockheed. Precision mattered. She took her seat, 1A, aisle, window just behind the cockpit. She settled in with her bag still on her lap, thumb tracing the worn edge of a folded photo tucked inside. It was Isaac at age 11, presenting a homemade water filter to the science fair judges, grinning like he already knew he'd win. She smiled. A flight attendant offered her sparkling water. Evelyn declined with a polite shake of the head. "I'll wait for takeoff." The cabin was half full, an older couple whispering in 2B and C, a man already on a business call in 3D. The hum of boarding announcements filtered through the half-open curtain. Then, footsteps. Not the smooth, practiced strides of flight staff, but heavier, less certain. Evelyn turned slightly. A man in a navy blazer, not uniformed, but wearing a badge on a lanyard, approached, followed closely by the flight attendant who just offered her water. "Ma'am," the man said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I'm going to have to ask you to step off the aircraft with us." Evelyn blinked. "Is there a problem?" Her voice was even, unshaken. "Just a minor seating reassignment," he said. "Internal routing protocol. Should only take a moment to clear up." She looked at him, then at the flight attendant. Neither offered anything more. Around her, people had begun to listen. The man in 3D glanced up. The couple in 2B paused mid-conversation. Evelyn didn't ask again. She pressed her lips together, reached for her tote, and stood. "Would you mind retrieving my coat?" she asked the flight attendant gently. The woman hesitated, then complied. Evelyn nodded her thanks. The man with the badge stepped aside to let her through. No apology. No explanation. Just protocol. As she stepped into the jet bridge, the air felt different, hollow somehow, like dignity being siphoned out through the vents. Evelyn didn't speak. She walked with grace, head held level, shoulders back. At the end of the bridge, beside the gate podium, he gestured vaguely toward a seating area. "We'll try to get you another spot soon. Just a random reassignment. It happens." Evelyn didn't answer. She stepped aside, pulled out her phone, and made a single call. "Marcus," she said when it picked up. "We'll need to take another look at our support for Atlantic Sky's fleet program. Something just happened." "No, not over the phone. Just be ready when I land." Marcus Lane didn't ask questions. Not yet. She hung up and slid her phone back into her bag. At the podium, a different gate agent, this one no older than 25, was clicking through the flight manifest, nervously eyeing Evelyn out of the corner of her gaze. "Ma'am, we're doing everything we can to rebook you," she offered, voice rehearsed. "This is just a capacity issue in the forward cabin. I'm trying to find another seat." Evelyn nodded once but said nothing. She walked to the window, took out a notebook, and began writing names, times, what was said, what wasn't. Nearby, a man leaned toward his wife. "That's the woman they pulled off," he whispered. She frowned. She looked like she belonged there. She did. Across the gate, a woman took a photo on her phone quietly, as if unsure whether this was a moment she was supposed to capture or ignore. In the cockpit of Flight 345, the pilot read the note passed through by dispatch: "Passenger removed due to gate reassignment, protocol issue." No further details. Evelyn approached the counter again. "Any update?" The young agent flinched slightly. "I'm sorry. The next available flight isn't until 6:40 this evening." "We can arrange a hotel. I'll make my own arrangements," Evelyn interrupted. "But before I leave, I'd like the name of the supervisor who approved the change." The girl hesitated. "That would be Ronald Keating." "And his direct supervisor?" I'd have to check." "Please do." A few rows behind her, Simone Carter watched. She hadn't said anything. Not yet. She was a junior analyst on the operations side, mostly dealt with fuel metrics and cabin occupancy modeling. But what she saw didn't sit right. Simone waited until Evelyn walked away and then quietly opened a flagged email chain she wasn't supposed to have access to. Subject line: cabin demographics, high visibility routes. Keywords: optics, non-premium visuals, brand cohesion. She exhaled and stared at the screen. Then, she copied it. Back near the security entrance, Evelyn sat at a cafe with a mug of herbal tea and a stillness that unnerved the young barista. She looked like someone's grandmother. She was. But she was also someone who'd briefed the Pentagon on propulsion schematics and knew how to take apart a turbine with a penknife and a clipboard. Across town, Marcus Lane was already combing through the Foundation's disbursement ledger, $93.6 million over 7 years, half of it to Atlantic Skies. He called her. "I've got it all." "Good," Evelyn said, sipping. "I think they'll want to hear from us." She didn't look up. She didn't need to. The world was already watching. Marcus Lane didn't sleep that night. After Evelyn's calm but loaded phone call, he sat in his home office, the glow of 2 monitors illuminating the room like a war room before dawn. He had worked alongside Evelyn Brooks for 18 years, serving as executive director of the Brooks Trust for Sustainable Infrastructure, a philanthropic powerhouse known more for results than for headlines. Evelyn never called unless it mattered. And when she used the phrase "take another look at our support," Marcus knew what she really meant. It was time to shake the floorboards. By morning, he had pulled every contract, grant summary, and disbursement report tied to Atlantic Skies, the airline that had escorted Evelyn off Flight 345 like she didn't belong there. $93.6 million, distributed over 7 years. Most of it earmarked for clean fuel research, airport solar retrofits, and diversity-forward aviation internships. Evelyn had signed off on every one of them. The woman they humiliated was the woman who helped fund their future. While Marcus organized a meeting with legal counsel, something else was happening, quiet but fast. A video. Blurry, grainy, captured by a teenage girl waiting to board the same flight. It showed Evelyn rising from her seat. Dignified. Collected. No shouting. No fuss. Just a soft-spoken "would you mind retrieving my coat," as the flight attendant hesitated, then complied. The video ended with Evelyn stepping off the plane, purse in hand, eyes steady, while passengers whispered. One woman in 3A was heard muttering, "Why her?" Within hours, the video was posted on social media. A local activist account picked it up first. then a regional news blog, then a verified journalist with a national following who added one sentence: "Her name is Evelyn Brooks. She helped fund the green engines under that plane." The internet did what it always does when it sees injustice cloaked in civility: it made it viral. By 4:15 p.m., Evelyn's name was trending. She hadn't posted a word. Meanwhile, in a quiet office at Atlantic Sky's HQ, a junior analyst named Simone Carter stared at her screen. She had seen the name E. Brooks flagged in an internal email that morning, which sent her digging through threads she wasn't supposed to see. One in particular stuck out. Subject line: Forward Cabin Demographics, Flight 345. The body of the email mentioned the need to ensure front-facing rows reflect our target premium image. Then a reply: Passenger Brooks placed in 1A, please confirm. Could trigger optics pushback if not adjusted. Simone had read that sentence 3 times. Optics pushback. She wasn't an executive. She wasn't even permanent. But she had morals and a PDF printer. She hit download. At 5:02 p.m., Marcus sent a single-page letter to Atlantic Sky's legal department. It was short, precise, and unforgiving. Effective immediately, the Brooks Trust suspends all current and future funding, pending internal review of the airline's policies related to passenger treatment and partner alignment. The final line read: "We are stewards of dignity, not just capital." He CC'd the board. At 5:07, he emailed Evelyn. "It's done." Evelyn, sitting in a quiet cafe in Atlanta, stirred honey into her tea and read the message without changing expression. She replied with one word: "Thank you." Chaos bloomed like wildfire inside Atlantic Sky's executive floor. Phone lines buzzed. Slack channels exploded. The general counsel fired off 5 urgent messages. One to the CEO. One to external affairs. And one that said, "Has anyone confirmed it's the Evelyn Brooks?" The answer came fast: "Yes. It's her. Check the sustainability ledger." At 6:11 p.m., a panicked senior executive called their head of PR: "Do not let this become a race issue. Draft a neutral statement immediately." But the public wasn't waiting. Evelyn's name had become more than a hashtag. News anchors picked up the video and played it beside charts of her foundation's investments. Civil rights groups began releasing statements. One read: "When the woman helping build the runway is denied a seat on the plane, something is broken." Meanwhile, Simone Carter was staring at her laptop, hands shaking. She had just finished an anonymous email to a well-known aviation ethics journalist. Attached, the internal emails. She closed her laptop and whispered, "Let them see it." The next morning, the email thread leaked. The public saw everything. Words like optics and non-premium visuals spread like digital poison. Network news anchors debated it live. A former airline diversity consultant called the leak a masterclass in microaggressions disguised as protocol. At the Brooks Trust offices, Marcus Lane fielded calls from CNN, NPR, and The Washington Post. Evelyn declined all interview requests. "We're planning Isaac's graduation," she told Marcus. "That's the only story I care about this week." When the media asked for a statement, Marcus gave one: "Ms. Brooks has nothing to add at this time. Her values have already spoken." But that didn't stop the groundswell. Former Atlantic Sky's employees began speaking out. Stories surfaced of similar treatment: quiet downgrades, reassignments, selective enforcement of boarding zones. A Senate aide leaked that 2 Transportation Committee members were drafting a letter demanding an inquiry. In a South Carolina high school, a black science teacher replayed Evelyn's boarding video to her STEM class and said, "This is what grace under fire looks like." Simone Carter, still anonymous to the world, received a message from the journalist she'd sent the leak to. "You changed the conversation. Stay safe." Inside Atlantic Skies, 3 board members demanded an emergency meeting. One reportedly said, "If we lose that trust's funding, our next green bond collapses." Another added, "This isn't just about optics anymore. This is about our soul. By day 4, Evelyn was still silent. She had attended Isaac's graduation with a gentle smile and a pale pink shawl over her shoulders. No press, no fanfare. Just a proud grandmother taking photos of her grandson beaming in his cap and gown. She clapped quietly, hugged him tightly, and whispered, "They can't take moments like this away from us." Across the country, protesters held signs outside Atlantic Sky's terminals. One read, "You reassigned the wrong seat." Another, "Respect isn't a seat number. It's a standard." The airline released a public statement filled with phrases like ongoing review, deep regret, and renewed commitment to diversity. The comments section shredded it. "Where's the apology to Evelyn Brooks?" one user wrote. Another, "She gave you millions. You gave her a gate bench." A journalist called Marcus and asked what Evelyn thought about the reaction. "She thinks people are finally listening," he said. And that's all she ever wanted. In a quiet corner of Atlanta, Evelyn sat with a photo album, slipping in a new picture of Isaac's graduation. The caption she wrote beneath it wasn't about the flight. It simply said, "This is the legacy." And as the news cycle raged, as networks dissected every policy memo and ethics clause, Evelyn folded a handwritten letter, addressed it to Simone Carter, care of a return mailbox in D.C., and wrote 2 words on the bottom corner before sealing the envelope: "Keep going." The morning after Isaac's graduation, Evelyn Brooks sat at the edge of the guest room bed, the soft Georgia light pooling through the curtains. Her suitcase remained half-packed on the luggage rack, untouched since she'd arrived. The shawl she'd worn at the ceremony, dusty rose, hand-stitched by her late sister, lay folded neatly across the armchair. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, but she didn't reach for it. The news cycle hadn't slowed. If anything, it had grown louder. Headlines still spun with her name, only now it was framed in reverence, speculation, and power. Philanthropist behind Green Skies pulls funding after flight discrimination. The grace of Evelyn Brooks. The woman who sat down and then stood taller than them all. None of those voices mattered here, not in this room, not now. Evelyn's gaze rested on the graduation photo she'd printed from Isaac's university portal. He stood between her and his mother, cap askew, smile wide, arms slung around the 2 women who had shaped him. That was the real story, the only one that mattered. At breakfast, Isaac poured her coffee without asking how she took it. He already knew. "They're still talking about you," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "One of my professors quoted you in class. Called you a case study in ethical disruption." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I didn't do anything dramatic." "That's exactly why it worked," he said, grinning. "You didn't have to yell." She didn't respond. She sipped her coffee instead and watched the steam rise. That afternoon, she returned to her hotel suite in downtown Atlanta. Flowers had arrived, sunflowers from a 3rd-grade class in Birmingham, daisies from a tech startup in Austin, and white roses from an anonymous sender with a note that simply read, "For the seat they thought you didn't deserve." On the desk lay a fresh letter from Marcus. A copy of the board resolution affirming the trust's withdrawal from Atlantic Skies and a summary of responses from other airline partners reassessing their DEI protocols. She flipped through the pages, then paused. Tucked into the final folder was an invitation from the Birmingham Civic Hall. A commemorative lecture series was being held the following week honoring pioneering women in STEM. They asked if she would close the event. She stared at the invite for a long time. Birmingham. The same city where, in 1971, she gave her first public talk as an engineer, the only black woman on a panel full of men. Back then, they barely looked at her when she spoke. She remembered the way her voice had trembled, not from fear, but from knowing how little room she had to speak and how much weight every word carried. And yet, here was that same city, asking her to speak again. She folded the letter and set it aside. Later that night, Evelyn walked through Centennial Park with a shawl around her shoulders and thoughts circling in her chest like migrating birds. She wasn't seeking a stage. She never had. But the country had handed her a microphone anyway. Maybe it was time to use it, but only on her terms. 1 week later, the Civic Hall was full. No fanfare. No red carpet. Just a clean stage, a wooden podium, and a single banner overhead, voices that built the future. Evelyn stepped out to quiet applause. She wore a navy blue blazer and the same cream linen blouse she'd worn on Flight 345. She didn't have notes. Didn't need them. Her voice, when it came, was calm. Measured. A little hoarse at first, like an old engine warming up. "I didn't come here today for revenge," she began. "I came because I was asked to speak, and this time, I didn't have to beg for the mic." The audience was still, the silence thick with reverence. "2 weeks ago, I was asked to leave a plane," she said. "No reason. No explanation. Just protocol. I left without raising my voice. I didn't file a lawsuit. I didn't make a scene. I made a phone call. And the system shifted." Her gaze swept the crowd, a sea of young women, community organizers, educators, engineers. Some people called it grace. Others called it poise. I call it muscle memory. The kind you build when the world tells you to shrink, but you choose to sit taller instead. Murmurs of agreement rippled. "This wasn't the first time something like this happened to someone like me," she continued. "And if we're not careful, it won't be the last. But maybe, just maybe, the next time someone in a linen suit and pearl earrings steps into first class, they'll think twice before asking her to prove she belongs." She paused, letting the air settle. "I've spent my life designing systems, jet engines, environmental platforms, organizational frameworks. But the hardest one to build is dignity. Not for ourselves, we already have that, but for others to recognize it." Her hands rested lightly on the podium. "I don't need to name the airline. That's not what this is about. It's about what happens when silence finally says enough. And when the quiet ones decide we've been quiet long enough." Her final line came not with thunder, but with clarity. "I didn't ask to be heard," she said. "But since they listened, let's make it count." She stepped back. No encore. No curtain call. Just a nod of the head and an exit as composed as her entrance. The applause was quiet at first, then swelled into something that felt like a thank you from a country that had waited too long to listen. In the following weeks, the impact rippled outward. Airline boardrooms across the nation initiated policy overhauls. Diversity audits. Public apologies. Training modules rewritten, reviewed, retaught. Evelyn didn't attend those meetings. She didn't need to. Her words were already doing the work. Scholarship applications at engineering schools began including a new prompt: "How has the story of Evelyn Brooks inspired your pursuit of change?" Simone Carter, the analyst who leaked the email thread, was quietly promoted to head of ethics and internal review. She never met Evelyn in person. But one day, a handwritten note arrived at her office. "Keep going," it said, in script both elegant and unmistakably strong. At home in Charlotte, Evelyn sat on her porch with a mug of chamomile and the evening paper folded beside her. The sky above her turned that soft amber pink the South is known for. On the table was a letter, yellowed at the corners, from her husband, written nearly 30 years before he passed. It ended with a line she had never forgotten: "You don't need a platform to make an impact, just a reason." She smiled and folded it closed. Somewhere out there, the world had caught up to what she'd always known. And now that it was listening, she had just one more message: move forward. Walk with grace. And if they ask you to give up your seat, let them know you're already building the runway. As the author of Evelyn Brooks' story, I want to share with you what this quiet yet powerful journey has taught me, and, perhaps, what it might offer you as well. This story was never about drama. It was about dignity. It wasn't about shouting louder. It was about standing taller. Evelyn Brooks reminded us that strength doesn't always look like a raised fist. It can look like a calm gaze, a firm voice, or a single phone call made in silence. In a world that often rewards noise and spectacle, Evelyn proved that real power can come from knowing who you are, refusing to be shaken, and holding others accountable without ever needing to raise your voice. We live in a time where injustice sometimes hides behind policy, where bias cloaks itself in professionalism, and where gatekeepers still try to decide who belongs in which seat. But Evelyn's experience showed us that when grace meets preparation, when someone who knows her worth refuses to be diminished, change becomes inevitable. Her story wasn't just about one flight or one airline. It was about a larger truth that many people, especially women of color, move through spaces they've earned yet are still asked to prove they belong. Evelyn didn't protest with noise, she protested with action. A withdrawn partnership. A powerful speech. And most of all, a refusal to shrink in the face of subtle humiliation. So what's the lesson here? Know your worth, especially when others pretend not to see it. Don't let someone else's discomfort shrink your presence. Document what matters. Speak when it counts. And when the world finally leans in to listen, speak with such clarity that silence is no longer an option. And to those who see themselves in Evelyn, those who have been overlooked, underestimated, or made to feel out of place, I say this: you don't need permission to claim your space. You don't need to yell to be heard. Sometimes, being grounded in truth is the loudest sound in the room. From all of us at US Instructive Stories, thank you for listening, for caring, and for thinking deeply about the stories that reflect the heart of our country. If Evelyn's journey moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, we hope you'll share this message with someone who needs it. Because change doesn't just happen in headlines. It starts in moments like these, between people who are finally ready to see, to speak, and to act. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and remember, sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that speaks without trembling.